For most of my life, I thought if I worked hard enough, someone would eventually notice. But the moment I finally understood the truth changed everything. The strange thing about becoming invisible is that it does not happen all at once. It happens slowly, quietly, so quietly that you barely notice it at first. My name is Daniel Harper. I am 38 years old now, and if you met me at work, you would probably describe me as dependable, calm, the guy who handles things. That word followed me everywhere. Dependable. I used to think that was enough. Early in my career, I worked as a project analyst at a mid-sized logistics company outside of Cleveland. Nothing glamorous. Rows of gray cubicles, fluorescent lights that hummed softly all day. The kind of place where birthdays were celebrated with grocery store cake and a generic card passed around for signatures. I kept my head down and learned everything I could. When someone missed a deadline, I stayed late to fix it. When a spreadsheet was wrong, I rebuilt it from scratch. When a client was frustrated, I drafted the email my manager eventually sent under his own name. I told myself this was how it worked. Hard work first, recognition later. There was one early moment that sticks with me. About a year into the job, our team landed a major account. It had taken months of analysis and late nights. I built the forecasting model that sealed the deal. I knew it inside and out. I could see every moving piece in my head. At the quarterly meeting, my manager, Paul, stood up and walked everyone through the win. He clicked through slides I had made. He repeated phrases I had written. He accepted congratulations. I remember sitting there, hands folded in my lap, thinking, he will mention me at the end. He did not. Afterward, a few coworkers slapped him on the back. Someone joked about him being promotion material. I stood near the coffee station, waiting for the right moment to say something like, I actually worked on that too. But every time I opened my mouth, the timing felt wrong. The conversation moved too fast. Someone else stepped in. I told myself it would be awkward to interrupt, that it would sound needy. So I stayed quiet. I convinced myself that real recognition takes time. That consistency builds a reputation slowly. That serious people notice serious work. That was the first story I told myself. At home, it was not much different. I grew up the middle child between two louder siblings. My older brother, Mark, had a voice that filled a room. My younger sister, Alyssa, had emotions that did the same. I learned early that the easiest way to survive family dinners was to listen. My parents never ignored me on purpose. That is important. They loved me. I know that. But love is not the same as attention. At Thanksgiving one year, Mark talked for 20 straight minutes about his new business idea. Everyone leaned in. Questions, advice, laughter. Later, Alyssa shared a dramatic story about a breakup. My mother reached across the table and held her hand. My father shook his head in sympathy. When there was a pause, my mom looked at me and said, How is work, Danny? I remember thinking, this is the moment. I could have told them about the account I helped land, about the late nights, about how proud I quietly was. Instead, I said, it is good, busy. And that was it. The conversation moved on. I told myself they would ask more next time. With friends, I was the steady one. The one who drove when someone had too much to drink. The one who helped move apartments. The one who listened at 2 in the morning when someone's marriage was falling apart. I prided myself on that. Being solid. Being there. I never asked for much in return. I thought that was what made it meaningful. There were small moments, though, where I almost stepped forward. Like at my friend Jason's 40th birthday party. His wife gave a toast and thanked everyone for supporting him through a tough year. She listed names, one by one. I had spent hours on the phone with him when he thought he was going to lose his job. I helped him rewrite his resume. I connected him with a recruiter I knew. My name never came up. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. Not anger, just that quiet, hollow ache. I could have brushed it off and said something later. I could have joked about being his unpaid career coach. Instead, I smiled and clapped with everyone else. Driving home that night, I told myself, he knows. That is enough. That became my second story. They know. Even if they do not say it, they know. Years passed like that. Me waiting for some moment where the scales would tip, where the steady presence I offered would circle back in a visible way. I believed that patience would eventually pay off. I did not realize that I was slowly teaching everyone exactly how to treat me. And I definitely did not realize that the moment I had been waiting for was never coming. At least, not in the way I imagined. Because the first real crack in that belief did not happen at work. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, when I accidentally overheard a conversation that was never meant for me. That Tuesday afternoon started like any other. I had stayed late again. The office was quieter after 6. The hum of the fluorescent lights felt louder when most of the team had already gone home. I liked that time of day. No small talk. No pressure. Just the soft click of keys and the sense that I was holding things together. I was walking toward the conference room to grab a folder I had left behind when I heard my name. Not loud. Not angry. Just casual. The door was slightly cracked. Inside were Paul and Karen from senior management. They were reviewing candidates for an upcoming promotion. A team lead position. The kind of role I had quietly been preparing for, without ever saying it out loud. Paul said, "Daniel is solid. Always delivers." There was a pause. Papers shuffled. Karen replied, "He is reliable, sure. But he does not really have leadership presence." Leadership presence. I stood there, frozen. Paul chuckled lightly. "Yeah, he is more of a behind-the-scenes guy, not someone who commands a room." Behind the scenes. Karen added, "We need someone who advocates for their ideas. Someone visible." Visible. I felt that word hit harder than anything else. They were not criticizing my work. In fact, they seemed satisfied with it. That almost made it worse. I was useful, dependable, safe, just not seen as someone who stepped forward. Paul said something else that I still replay in my head. "Daniel is the kind of guy who keeps the engine running, but he does not ask for the wheel." They moved on to discuss another colleague. Tyler. Younger. Louder. The kind of guy who would jump into meetings and pitch half-formed ideas with confidence. They praised his initiative, his energy. I slipped away before they came out. I went back to my desk and stared at my screen. My chest felt tight, not from anger, but from recognition. They were not wrong. I had never asked for the wheel. I had assumed that if I kept the engine running long enough, someone would eventually hand it to me. That night, driving home, I tried to tell myself it did not matter. That promotions were political anyway. That I did not want the spotlight. But something deeper stirred. A small, uncomfortable truth. Maybe I had confused being low maintenance with being overlooked. Maybe I had mistaken silence for humility. And maybe, just maybe, I had been standing behind the glass my whole life, watching everyone else step forward, while convincing myself I preferred it that way. I did not know it yet, but that overheard conversation was not the real breaking point. The real one came a week later, when the promotion was announced. The promotion was announced on a Friday morning. We were all gathered in the main conference room, balancing paper cups of burnt coffee and pretending we were not curious. I already knew, deep down. I had heard enough through that cracked door. Still, a small part of me hoped I had misunderstood. Paul cleared his throat and smiled that practiced corporate smile. He talked about growth, momentum, the future of the department. Then he said Tyler's name. The room broke into applause. Tyler looked shocked in that way people do when they have absolutely been expecting something. He shook Paul's hand. A few people whistled. Someone clapped him on the back hard enough to make him stumble forward. I clapped too. I even smiled. Tyler deserved it, I told myself. He was good at what he did. He spoke up in meetings. He pushed ideas. He made himself visible, Paul added, almost as an afterthought. And of course, thanks to everyone who supported these projects behind the scenes. Behind the scenes. There it was again. No names. Just a general thank you that floated in the air and dissolved before it landed anywhere specific. After the meeting, people crowded around Tyler's desk. Laughter. Plans for celebratory drinks. He looked overwhelmed in the best way. I walked back to my cubicle. On my desk sat the quarterly performance review I had received 2 days earlier. I picked it up and read the highlighted line again. Daniel consistently exceeds expectations and demonstrates strong reliability. Reliability. There was not a single note about initiative. Not one suggestion that I could lead. Just praise for being steady. For the first time, that word did not feel like a compliment. It felt like a label. Later that afternoon, Tyler stopped by my desk. He thanked me for the forecasting model I had built last month. Said he would not have had half the data he needed without it. He meant it. I could tell. I nodded and said, "You earned it." And I meant that too. But as he walked away, something twisted inside me. Not resentment toward him. Toward myself. I had done the work. I had seen the patterns before anyone else did. I had stayed late fixing problems no one else wanted to touch. But I had never said, this was my contribution. I had assumed someone else would. Driving home that night, I felt strangely hollow. Not devastated. Not furious. Just aware. aware that years had passed with me waiting for a moment that required me to speak. And I never had. What I did not realize then was that work was only one layer of it. Because the next reminder that I was easy to overlook did not happen in an office. It happened at my own birthday dinner. My birthday dinner was never supposed to mean anything. I turned 38 that year. Not a milestone. Not one of those ages people make speeches about. My sister Alyssa suggested we all go out to this Italian place downtown. Mark agreed. My parents said they were free. It felt simple. Easy. I told myself not to expect much. Just a meal. Some conversation. Maybe a slice of cake with a candle stuck in it. We sat at a long table near the window. The place was loud in that cozy way, plates clinking, waiters weaving between chairs. I sat in the middle, across from my dad. For a few minutes, it actually felt good. Everyone was there. That should have been enough. Then Mark launched into a story about a new investor he was courting. He spoke with his hands, leaning forward, voice rising and falling like he was pitching the entire restaurant. My dad nodded along, asking sharp questions. My mom looked proud. Alyssa interrupted halfway through to talk about a parenting dilemma with her oldest. Suddenly, the table shifted again. Advice, sympathy, laughter. I waited. At one point, the waiter came over and asked whose birthday it was. Alyssa pointed at me. A few people at nearby tables clapped politely. The waiter smiled and said dessert would be on the house. Everyone cheered for about 5 seconds. Then the conversation picked right back up where it left off. Not about me. Not about anything in my life. Just the same current carrying everyone else forward. I stared at my glass of water and felt that old familiar thought rise up. Say something. I could have told them about the promotion I had hoped for. About the conversation I overheard. About how tired I was of being solid. Instead, when my mom finally looked at me and said, "So, Danny, anything new with you?" I gave the same answer I had been giving for years. Not much. Work is steady. Steady. My dad nodded approvingly. That is good. Stability is important. And that was it. Later, when the cake came out, everyone sang. I smiled. I blew out the candles. My sister hugged me. My brother squeezed my shoulder. It all looked right from the outside. But driving home alone that night, I realized something that made my stomach sink. No one had asked a single follow-up question about my life. Not because they did not care. Because I had trained them not to. I gave them nothing to dig into. No details. No vulnerability. No space to see me. And as I pulled into my driveway, another thought crept in, quieter but sharper than the rest. What if the reason no one noticed me was because I never truly stepped into view? A few weeks after my birthday, Jason invited a small group of us over for a late dinner. Nothing fancy. Just takeout containers spread across his kitchen counter and a basketball game humming in the background. I almost did not go. Lately, being around people felt heavier. Not because they were cruel, just because I kept noticing the same pattern everywhere I turned. Still, I showed up. That is what I did. Jason greeted me with a quick handshake and an absent-minded, "Good to see you, man," before turning back to the stove. His wife, Erica, was telling a story about her new role at work. Everyone leaned in. Questions. Encouragement. I stood near the fridge, holding a soda, nodding along. At some point, the conversation shifted to career moves. Promotions. Raises. Tyler's name even came up, since he and Jason knew each other through a mutual friend. "Guy is killing it," Jason said. "Always talking about his projects. You can tell he is hungry." Hungry. That word sat there. Jason turned to me. "How about you, Dan? Everything good?" There it was again. The doorway. Open, but narrow. My heart started pounding harder than it should have. I could feel the words lining up behind my teeth. "Actually, no. I am not good. I am tired of being invisible. I am tired of doing the work and watching other people stand in the light." Instead, I heard myself say, "Same old stuff." Erica smiled politely. The conversation rolled on. I felt it happen in real time. The closing of the door. Later that night, after a few drinks had loosened everyone up, Jason pulled me aside. He said something casually, not realizing how deep it would land. "You are lucky, you know," he said. "No drama. No chaos. You just glide through life." Glide. I almost laughed. He saw calm. He saw stability. He saw someone untouched by conflict. What he did not see were the swallowed words, the held-back opinions, the small daily choices to stay quiet because it felt easier than risking discomfort. Driving home, I replayed that moment over and over. The question, my chance, my silence. It hit me harder than the promotion ever did. No one was stopping me from speaking. No one was cutting me off mid-sentence. The truth was simpler and more uncomfortable. I was disappearing by choice. And for the first time, that realization did not feel sad. It felt dangerous. Because if invisibility was something I had built through silence, then it meant something else too. It meant I could tear it down. But doing that would require something I had avoided my entire life. It would require me to take up space. Taking up space sounds simple in theory. In reality, it feels like stepping into traffic and hoping the cars slow down. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks after Tyler's promotion, we had a strategy meeting about a new client rollout. Big contract, tight deadline. Everyone crowded around the long conference table, laptops open, voices overlapping. I had already spent days analyzing the data. I saw a potential bottleneck in the shipping model, a flaw that would cost us money if we ignored it. Olmi would have drafted an email later. Send it quietly to Tyler. Let him bring it up as his own insight if he wanted. But something about that overheard conversation, about my birthday dinner, about Jason calling my life gliding, had shifted something inside me. Halfway through the meeting, as Tyler outlined the timeline, I felt that familiar hesitation creep in. Say it later. Do not interrupt. Wait your turn. Then I thought about the cracked conference room door. About behind the scenes. My heart pounded. My palms felt damp. I cleared my throat. Can I jump in for a second? The room did not fall silent dramatically. No one gasped. A few heads turned. That was it. I walked through the flaw in the model. Calmly. Directly. I explained how the projected volume in month 3 would overwhelm the regional warehouse. I showed the numbers. There was a pause. Tyler blinked at the screen. Paul leaned forward. You were sure about that? Paul asked. Yes, I said. My voice did not shake, which surprised me. We pulled up the live data. Ran it again. I was right. The room shifted in a subtle way. Not applause. Not fireworks. Just a slight reorientation. Paul nodded slowly. Good catch, Daniel. Good catch. It was a small thing. Almost laughably small. But it felt different. After the meeting, Tyler stopped me in the hallway. He did not look defensive. He looked thoughtful. Why did you not flag that earlier? He asked. I could have blamed time. Workload. Anything. Instead, I said the truth. I usually do. Just not out loud. He studied me for a second, then nodded. You should. That was it. No grand revelation. No dramatic handshake. But something in me settled. That afternoon, I noticed something else too. People asked me follow-up questions. Not because I had worked harder. I had always worked hard. Because I had spoken. It was almost unsettling how simple it was. And yet, that small shift at work did not fix everything. Because later that week, at a family gathering I almost skipped, I realized that speaking up once does not automatically rewrite years of silence. Especially when the people closest to you have grown used to you staying small. And this time, the cost of staying quiet would feel much higher. It was my mother's house this time. Sunday dinner. The kind that had not changed in 20 years. Same oak table. Same faint smell of garlic and furniture polish. Same seating arrangement, like we were locked into roles we never consciously agreed to. I almost skipped it. Part of me was still riding the quiet high from speaking up at work. That small good catch had done more for me than any performance review ever had. But I knew this was different territory. Family patterns run deeper. Mark was already mid-story when I walked in. Something about expanding his business again. My dad leaned back in his chair, fully engaged. Alyssa chimed in from the other end of the table about her kids' schedules, her voice layered with exhaustion and pride. I took my usual seat. The old instinct whispered, let them go first. Wait your turn. Do not disrupt the rhythm. Dinner moved along predictably. Laughter. Debates. Opinions layered over opinions. At one point, my dad turned to Mark and said, You have always had that leadership streak. Something inside me tightened. Not jealousy, just recognition. Leadership streak. I thought about the meeting at work, about clearing my throat and stepping in. Halfway through dessert, my mom turned to me with that familiar soft expression. How is everything with you, Danny? There it was again. The narrow doorway. My pulse picked up. My mind tried to default to the usual script. Steady. Busy. Same old. Instead, I paused. Not dramatically. Just long enough that the table actually went quiet. Actually, I said, it has not been steady. For heads turned. I felt exposed. Ridiculous, even. Like I was overreacting to a simple question. I did not get a promotion I was hoping for, I continued. And I realized part of that is because I do not speak up enough. The words hung there. Not explosive, just honest. My dad frowned slightly, as if recalibrating. You never mentioned going for a promotion. I know, I said. That was the point. Alyssa tilted her head. You always seem fine. I thought you liked staying under the radar. That one landed. I told myself that, I replied. But I think I just got used to not taking up space. The room felt different now. Not hostile, just unfamiliar. Mark leaned forward. You should have said something. I would have helped you prep. I almost laughed at the irony. I am starting to, I said quietly. No applause followed. No dramatic family breakthrough. But something subtle shifted. They asked follow-up questions. Real ones. About the project. About what I wanted next. It was uncomfortable. It felt messy. It did not flow as easily as their usual conversations. But for the first time in a long time, I was not watching from behind the glass. And yet, even as I spoke, a heavier truth settled in. I had spent years waiting for someone to notice my silence. No one had been waiting. The world had simply adjusted to the space I allowed myself to occupy. And if I wanted something different, I was going to have to do more than clear my throat once. I was going to have to stop waiting altogether. The real turning point did not come with applause. It came with a mistake. A month after that family dinner, we were presenting the revised rollout plan to the new client. Big video call. Executives on both sides. Slides polished. Numbers double-checked. Tyler led the presentation. I handled the operational breakdown. Halfway through, one of the client executives asked a direct question about projected loss margins if volume exceeded expectations. I knew the answer. I had run the numbers 3 times. But Tyler jumped in first and gave a rough estimate. It was optimistic. Too optimistic. I felt that old hesitation again. Do not contradict him. Not in front of everyone. Fix it later. The executive narrowed her eyes slightly. Are you confident in that projection? Tyler hesitated. I could feel the entire call balancing on a thin wire. This was the moment where the old version of me would stay silent. Protect harmony. Protect comfort. Instead, I leaned forward. If I can add something, I said. Tyler glanced at me. Not annoyed. Just surprised. The estimate depends heavily on month 3 volume. If we exceed baseline by more than 15%, the loss margin increases significantly unless we reroute through the secondary warehouse. Silence. I shared my screen. Walked through the numbers. Calm. Direct. The executive nodded slowly. Thank you. That is the clarity I was looking for. That sentence landed deeper than any compliment I had received in years. After the call ended, there was a pause in the conference room. Tyler turned to me. You should have led that section. There was no edge in his voice. Just honesty. Paul looked at me differently. Not like a background fixture. Like a contributor. And in that moment, I realized something that stung and freed me at the same time. No one had been holding me back. They had been responding to the version of me I consistently presented. Quiet. Supportive. Safe. I had built a life around being the steady presence in the room. But steady does not have to mean silent. That afternoon, as I packed up my laptop, I did not feel triumphant. I felt aware. Invisibility had never been forced on me. It had been reinforced by my own restraint. And once I saw that clearly, something shifted permanently. Because if I was capable of stepping in during a high-stakes client call, then I was capable of more. The question was no longer whether people would notice me. The question was whether I was willing to keep stepping forward. And the answer was beginning to change. The strange part is that once I stopped waiting, I realized how much of my life had been built around that habit. Waiting to be noticed. Waiting to be appreciated. Waiting to be invited further in. It showed up in small places. A week after the client call, Jason texted the group chat about planning a weekend trip. Usually, I would respond with something flexible. Whatever works. I am good with anything. Easy. Adaptable. Invisible. This time, I typed something different. I would prefer Saturday morning. I have plans Friday night. My thumb hovered over the screen before I hit send. It felt absurdly bold for such a small request. Jason responded almost immediately. Saturday works. That was it. No resistance. No pushback. No accusation that I was being difficult. Just adjustment. It hit me how many times I had bent first without even testing whether I needed to. At work, I started doing something equally small but equally new. When sending reports, I stopped burying my name in the footer. I wrote, I developed this forecast based on revised volume assumptions. Instead of here is the updated file. It was not arrogance. It was clarity. And people responded differently. Emails came back addressed directly to me. Questions came to my inbox instead of passing through someone else first. I noticed something else too. The more I spoke, the less resentment I felt. For years, I had carried a quiet frustration toward people who got attention, toward louder personalities, toward leaders who commanded rooms. Now I saw it differently. They were not stealing space from me. They were simply occupying the space they claimed. The defining realization did not come with a dramatic confrontation. It came one evening, sitting alone in my living room, lights low, the house quiet. I thought about all the moments I had almost spoken. The cracked conference room door, my birthday dinner, Jason's kitchen, countless smaller, forgettable pauses. No one had been waiting to notice me. They had been responding to what I offered. And what I had offered, for years, was quiet competence with no invitation to look closer. That truth could have been crushing. Instead, it felt liberating. Because if invisibility had been partly self-constructed, then visibility could be self-constructed too. Not through shouting, not through arrogance, not through forcing attention, but through presence, through answering questions fully instead of briefly, through stating preferences, through sharing wins without apologizing for them. The shift was quiet, but it was real. And for the first time in my life, I stopped scanning rooms to see if someone would call on me. I started speaking before I was invited. And something unexpected happened. I began to feel seen, not because everyone suddenly changed, but because I finally allowed myself to take up the space that had been open all along. And that, I realized, was never about them. It was about me. The final shift did not look dramatic from the outside. No promotion announcement. No grand speech at a family gathering. No viral moment where I suddenly became the loudest voice in the room. It was quieter than that. A few months after the client presentation, another leadership role opened up. Smaller team, less flashy, but real authority, real ownership. Old me would have waited to be tapped on the shoulder. This time, I scheduled a meeting with Paul. Even walking into his office felt unfamiliar. My heart beat harder than it should have. Not from fear of rejection, but from stepping outside a role I had worn for years. I would like to be considered for the team lead position, I said. No apology, no softening, no minimizing. He did not look shocked. He looked thoughtful. I was wondering when you would say that, he replied. That sentence hit differently than any praise I had received before. He went on to say that over the past few months, he had noticed a change. More initiative, more direct communication, more ownership. The change had not come from working longer hours. It had come from visibility. I did not get an immediate answer that day. There were interviews, formalities, process, but something inside me had already shifted beyond the outcome. That weekend, at another family dinner, I noticed it again. Mark began a story and paused mid-sentence, actually asking what I thought about a business idea. Alyssa texted me later asking for advice about a decision she was weighing. Not because I had become louder than them, because I had become clearer. I spoke about my goals openly now, shared my frustrations honestly, celebrated small wins without brushing them aside. And the world did not collapse. No one accused me of being arrogant. No one rejected me for taking up space. Most people adjusted effortlessly. The biggest revelation was this. People had never been intentionally overlooking me. They had been responding to the boundaries I set. For years, I had confused humility with self-erasure. I thought being easygoing meant shrinking. It does not. Taking up space does not mean dominating a room. It means allowing your thoughts, needs, and efforts to exist in it. I still listen more than I talk. That part of me did not disappear. But when something matters, I say it. When I want something, I ask. When I contribute, I own it. And in doing that, something simple but profound happened. I stopped waiting. I stopped scanning for signs that someone would finally notice me. Because being seen does not begin with other people looking your way. It begins the moment you decide you are allowed to stand where you are, fully, unapologetically, and without shrinking. For most of my life, I was patient, reliable, easy to overlook. Now I am present, and that has made all the difference.